So even though we started to have a lot of interest, we didn't get that much of the integrations. And, if you don't have the integration, you don't have the revenue. As a startup, you need the revenue, not just some signed documents.
Hey, this is Jesse here, and you're about to hear my discussion, Marek from Odin.gg, which powers the esports betting ecosystem. In this one, Marek explains what makes betting on esports different than betting on traditional sports, how an early pivot set the trajectory for Odin to become the infrastructure layer for the global esports betting ecosystem, how successfully navigating operator integration roadmaps led Odin to find product market fit, and how they're looking to grow through M&A and diversifying across verticals. This chat with Marek provided a rare look into what it looks like going from a startup to a scale-up, and I know you're going to enjoy this one as much as I did. The Betting Startups podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 4 out of the top 5 US operators personalize player experiences with Optimove. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/bettingstartups. And if you like what you see, you'll get your first month free. All right, we are back here on the Betting Startups podcast. We've been home for at least a few weeks now since everybody congregated in Las Vegas for G2E. And of the many people I saw there, I did get to spend a little bit of time, though not enough, with my guests for today's episode. And I thought, hey, since we didn't get enough time together in Las Vegas, let's get you onto the podcast and talk a little bit more. So I'm joined by Marek from Odin.gg, who is in the Czech Republic. And as I shared with you, Marek, before we started recording, I spent a few days in the Czech Republic in Prague when I was in university, which was some time ago now. I remember it fondly there, but I also admit my memories were a little bit hazed by, I think, what is your national drink? Absinthe, if I'm not mistaken. I did indulge in the absinthe. I'd due for a trip back to refresh those memories. In any case, thank you for joining the podcast. How's everything with you today?
I'm good, and many thanks, Jesse, for having me. And absolutely, it was lovely to speak to you at our event at G2E, but definitely happy to continue in the discussion that didn't happen properly there to continue over here.
Absolutely. There's just never enough time to have a proper discussion at those events, right? It almost feels like speed networking or speed dating. You're trying to have all of these quick hellos with everybody, but it doesn't allow a lot of time for a proper chat. So here we are.
Exactly. I fully agree with that.
All right. Well, look, lots for us to chat about, but as we always do at the start of these episodes, Marek, we want to hear about yourself and have you introduce yourself to our audience. So give us a bit of a sense of who you are, a bit about your background and some of the major chapters of your journey prior to co-founding Odin.
Yeah, so Marek Suchar, co-founder and head of partnerships at Odin.gg. I essentially comes from a financial background. So I worked almost a decade for Citibank on various roles when it comes to sales, marketing, and other roles there. And in that regard, I was also from the very early age also a gamer, worked like playing Diablo 2, StarCraft, Warcraft, also Defense of the Ancients, which became Dota 2 eventually. So that was kind of the story why I ended up at the esports section, even though finance I was intrigued with, but many times it was too hard to change, too hard to essentially move the things around and change them a bit to the flexibility. So that's why I entered more the esports angle of my career.
Well, let's fill in some gaps there because Odin is a fast-growing business. I mean, I guess I should also state maybe you're technically no longer a startup. You're very much at the scale-up phase now. So just talk about the origins there and kind of where you were at the time that, for you it was the right time to say, you know what, I want to start a company and I want to, focus on something I'm truly passionate about. Tell us a bit more about that chapter of it all.
It was a combination of things, and it was also some bridge in between like Citibank and Odin, where because of the banking, I was essentially offered a job at fintech. But at the time, I was also looking like, okay, am I going to join this fintech or what I'm going to do? And there were a couple of options where I spotted the job in the esports in Prague, and I joined the company. It was not very successful. And as the outcome of that company, some of the other folks later on were looking for some other opportunities on the market as well. And we were crazy enough, and we got an angel investor crazy enough to invest where Odin, which many of our partners probably wouldn't know, originally was supposed to be a bookmaker. So it was supposed to be a bookmaker, esports bookmaker that would create its own lines. So our expertise was like, we will have these strong lines, a lot of coverage, high uptime, and all of that. And then we realized that to do that, you need a significant marketing budget and significant budget for licenses. So we were like pivoted literally, and the guys like what we can do with this expertise, because the founders are essentially data scientists to developers and myself on the sales side. And we were looking at it the way what kind of expertise we actually have and what we can build. And we were already starting to build the backend for the odds calculation. And then we realized that B2C play is probably not the right place. So how we can pivot to something else, and we pivoted to B2B. And this was how, from originally esports-centric bookmaker, the B2B esports provider was born. And this was essentially the original story.
Well, it's a good case study, Marek, in listening to the market and also leaning into your strengths and capabilities as a founding team, right? To your point, you guys collectively had this experience to build the products you're now, building and commercializing, but, maybe your go-to-market strategy wasn't the right one initially. So it's a good case study in that. Let's fast forward to today. Can you just give us a quick high-level overview, a bit of an elevator pitch on what exactly Odin does today and sort of what the overall value proposition is of its products and who it's for?
Yeah, Odin GG is a market leader when it comes to esports betting solutions. We are one-stop shop for the global bookmakers when it comes to esports as such. So we provide all the services, starting with the data from our own trading, our own models, so essentially our own odds. On top of it, we have also risk management, we have iframe, we have widgets, so the bettors feel educated and they can make the selection directly on the bookmaker's webpage. We have additional content such as esports simulators. On top of it, we have also our own marketing agency that helps our customers to grow, target the audience, and with that, we grow with them. So in that sense, when you look at the market, we are essentially the only one that has end-to-end solution. We have a couple of competitors on the market, but they usually either focus only on data, only on the odds, only on the eSIMs, only on the widget side of things. But if you want to have one proposition for everything that you need as a bookmaker, you essentially go to Odin.
For the audience who may not be completely familiar with esports, can you sort of set the scene and talk a bit about esports at a high level, sort of what the market looks like, where it's at in its maturity right now here in 2025? And from a betting perspective, the role betting plays in the broader esports ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. Esports betting or esports in general is competitive gaming. So instead of playing the physical sport, you are using either the consoles, computers, or mobile phones to play the game, where you have a certain developer that created the game and you are tapping into the potential of that game. Globally, the most successful games, I would say, are from the betting perspective and the esports ecosystem is League of Legends, Dota 2, Counter-Strike, Valorant, King of Glory. We have up-and-comers when it comes to betting, but they have a significant audience already, such as Mobile Legends Bang Bang, Free Fire, PUBG Mobile, multiple other titles, FIFA, NBA 2K. So in that regard, what is similar and what is different is that when it comes to esports as such, people, I believe, are much more intertwined with the game because if you look at football, right, not many times you essentially get the helmet, get the full suit on, and you go to the field and play all the time necessary to essentially play the game. But still, you watch the game and you have a fan base and you bet on the game as well. And this is quite a common thing across entire sports. Where esports is quite different is that many times if you bet on esports, that means that when it comes to Counter-Strike, Dota 2 League, you started with playing the game at some point in time with your friends, with your family members. Then you moved into watching the game as well, watching your favorite streamers because you can learn from them how to be better at the game. Then you potentially start watching the professional esports as well with professional teams where you have your favorite players, you have your favorite teams, and eventually you would start betting on those teams or on those players as well. But where it all starts and where it has been continuing is that you are many times continuing to play the game. So you are also playing the game, you are familiar with the current stage of meta, what is the gameplay, and you are much more intertwined with the game because if something is happening in the game and it's cool, you can replicate it in your gameplay the next time you play, which many times this is not the question about the sports. And this is from the, where the generations are heading. Also, many times what we are seeing, hearing on the market is that this is for kids, this is underage better, this is underage players. And this is not the case at all. Counter-Strike, Dota League, they've been around for more than a decade. So people that were in their 20s, 30s, right now they are in 30s, 40s, they still love the game. They understand the intricacies of the game. Many times, if they have the job to do or business to run or kids to have, a race, they don't play the game anymore, but they still watch. And there are many times that enjoying the game that they are also betting on it. So from that perspective, esports is really quite a different beast. And also, if we look at the perspective how esports and sports are different, is that if you look at the sports, there are probably very few sports that made it to the like big leagues in the last couple of years or decade. We can probably speak about pedal, MAA, F1, MMA, F1. But when it comes to esports, we have constantly new titles coming up. So we have Valorant, that was not a thing a couple of years ago. It didn't even exist. We have PUBG Mobile. We have Mobile Legends Bang Bang. So these kind of titles, GeoGuessr, which was not a thing, also is right now having a lot of attention. So there are all the things where esports is kind of evolving, and there will be more and more of them. While in traditional sports, we will have very few probably new sports being created, being given the prime time. And also in a similar shape and form, when it comes to traditional sports, there is not that much of a changing of that sports. The last or the recent innovation probably in soccer from the perspective of betting was VAR. But in esports, we have constantly the games are being developed in terms of patches. So some heroes are weaker, stronger, some guns are going in and out of the game, some maps and all of that. So we, from the perspective of esports provider, we constantly need to update our models because the game is constantly shifting, the game is constantly moving. So there are multiple different bits and pieces where the audience is different, the sport is slightly different, it is evolving. And similarly, as we are looking at esports, many of the people are speaking about them as one category, but we will not be speaking about ball sports, right? We will not mix football, basketball, and tennis into the one category because there is a ball involved. But with esports, we have multiple shooters, MOBAs, and we are still essentially speaking about the esports as such.
So you touched upon a lot there. I mean, you basically highlighted a few key points as to what makes esports different than traditional sports. I'll add one more from my perspective. And I don't know if you know this about my background, Marek, by the way. I spent 6 years working with Pinnacle Sports, and I oversaw product management there, which included our esports product at the time. Mm-hmm. And I don't come from a gaming background. And in that role at that time, one thing I quickly learned about esports is that when you talk about packaging up and delivering an esports product in an esports experience, the expectations of the esports player are vastly different than the general expectations of a traditional stick and ball sport punter, right? Yeah. I'd love to get from your perspective kind of how you see, continuing the theme of differences between esports and other sports. When it comes to player and user preferences, expectations, etc., how do you sort of see esports being different and standing alone from the rest of the sports we're more familiar with?
Yeah, we are, in general, when we speak about esports, we are speaking about the younger generation of audience. And then you are used to content on demand, right? Netflix, boom, movie, Spotify, I want my favorite song. And suddenly you are going to bet on esports, and many times the uptime is lower, there are not that many markets, the coverage is not there. So this is what the younger generation essentially expect. I want to watch what I want, and I do it. So when I'm going to the bookmaker, I want to watch it as well, and I want to bet essentially constantly and instantly. And this is what we've seen many times on the bookmaker side, that they don't have the right product. And exactly as you've been with the Pinnacle, you build that relationship with the bettors, right? We are here. You made a statement as Pinnacle. We are essentially investing into the esports. We are sponsoring the tournaments. We are here when it comes to social element of things. And many times what we are seeing with the bookmakers is like, we don't have a good product and we don't care about that environment and about those, at this point in time, I wouldn't call them bettors, but fans. So if you do not care about them and the product is not good, you are not going to essentially succeed. And I believe this is what needs to change. And this is what our successful clients has been changing, that they have the right product, but at the same time, they go out to the community and try to build a storyline. I'm here, I'm sponsoring. So if you're interested into the esports, we are the place to go.
And that's an interesting point. And again, reflecting back on my experience at Pinnacle, one thing I learned again very quickly trying to deliver the esports product to the market is that esports players and esports audiences kind of sniff BS real quickly. As an operator offering an esports product, you have to really deliver it authentically, right? In a language they understand, in a form factor the players understand. And what it can't be, it can't exist in a traditional sort of spreadsheet UI with a traditional menu of betting markets. It has to kind of stand alone as its own unique experience and its own unique product ultimately at the end of the day. I guess what I'm curious, Marek, from your perspective, commercializing the Odin offering into the various operator partners you work with, how do you coach them and advise them on delivering that authentic experience? And what can operators do to, not be detected by the BS meters of the esports audiences?
Yeah, absolutely. Just one thing I would add and build upon what you've said. Also in esports, right? You have Counter-Strike, you have Dota 2, you have League. So if you pick up the language from League of Legends and speak to Dota 2 community, you are done. Like
Mm.
literally you are done. Nobody would essentially want to go to you and they will just, you will be quite well known in the community, but not for the good
For
reasons.
the wrong reasons, right?
Exactly. So absolutely. So on that side of things, and this pretty much is a bridge also why we bought a marketing agency, because back in the day what we learned was that we had at that point in time the clients that were interested to invest into the esports. They integrated our solution and at the same time they wanted to grow their traffic. And what they did was they went out and start speaking to the marketing agencies. Look, we want to do the esports and we want to grow the volume, we want to grow the audience and all of that. But this was standard marketing agency. They didn't have any idea about how esports work. So what we were looking at is that the more our partners grow, the more we grow as well. So we essentially need to help them with this part of the solution as well. So we acquired marketing agencies. So this way we can just send them to them and help them with the media buy, with the team sponsorships, with essentially the narratives. So how you can work with the influencers so it actually works. Which teams to potentially sponsor, because this brings the value, they deliver. It's not about just putting the logo on the jersey and that cut the deal. So essentially you want to work with the team because of the players and team having the community. So this is what we have learned and this is what we are trying to educate our partners about as well through the marketing agency Odin that we have.
One of the, I think, value propositions or one of the early promises of esports betting and some of the original marketing material maybe 10 years ago when esports products first started coming to market was that esports could fill the downtimes in between live sports, right? And it's, sort of an always on content stream. And for that reason, esports, and you can tell me the data if you have it there, but I think skews heavily towards live and in-play esports betting versus sort of pre-match markets. Talk a bit about just from an in-play perspective, Marek, and with Odin providing an in-play product. Any in-play product is a very challenging thing to offer. And there's uptime, there's latency, there's all of these complexities that we're all quite familiar with. But from an esports perspective, talk about what goes into building a live in-play product and just all of the complexities that come with that.
Yeah, this is really a complex and tough topic, and we can spend essentially another 1 to 2 hours of discussing that. But in a nutshell, when it comes to esports, really, as you said, around 80% across our portfolio happens in live, which means that, you need to be on top of the situation within the game, understanding the current meta, also understanding what is happening in the game, because you have the games that are fast-paced, such as Counter-Strike. You have the games that are complex, such as Dota and League of Legends. And in that regard, where specifically MOBAs are very specific, is that you can have the situation in the game where one team is constantly winning when it comes to goal difference, which is like a way to see how the team is progressing against the other team. But the other team has essentially a superhero that at some point in time can take over the entire game. And if you look at soccer, if you are winning 3-0, you are not suddenly going to lose. It needs to be 3-1, 3-2, tie, 3-3, and then you would lose potentially 4-3. In esports, in Dota 2, within 20 seconds, the entire situation of the game can change from one team completely winning to completely losing. So we need to be on top of these things. We need to have the right models for that. We need to have the right traders to understand the situations in the game for that. We also need to constantly update the models because of the patches that I essentially mentioned, where the game is being constantly developed, changed, improved. So all the time you need to be on top of things. And I believe that one of the main parts of our solution that is critical for this constant feedback loop and behavior, and understanding of the situation on the market, is the risk management that we have. So our clients, 76% of the bets that are going on our lines, we see the incoming bet slips in real time. So we know if there is a new patch, if the game changes. Good. Next day, data scientists, traders, they are essentially looking at the changes. They are trying to understand what will be the impact. But then, as soon as your lines are out, the bets started to come in. And you see, I'm losing money, I'm making money, we are good, not good. So we need to essentially adjust. And without this feedback loop, we can just rely on monthly reports from the partners, whether the margin was 10% or minus 10%. But because of this, we constantly know what is happening on the market when it comes to sentiment, patches and changes, and also when it comes to suspicious activity. So this way, it is not like we have a disconnect from the market, what is happening there, but we have a constant feedback loop that we are trying to constantly listen to and implement.
I mean, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, esports is continually evolving. There's new titles, there's new, leagues, new formats. Where do you see things going ultimately? And again, from the perspective of esports betting and with Odin being, the leading provider of esports betting product, where are the opportunities and really what has your interest as you look ahead here?
Yeah, what we are seeing essentially on the market are multiple different dynamics. We are definitely seeing new titles coming in and growing, such as Free Fire, Mobile Legends, Bang Bang. We are looking at the new markets such as Brazil that is opening up, US where it is opening up, even though we have a lot of things to essentially do to crack that market when it comes to its full potential. In addition to that, also when it comes to the market itself, it's consolidating significantly. So we are right now looking at 2 acquisitions ourselves. One of our competitors went out of the business this year. So we would expect much more consolidation on the market happening in the upcoming even months, not just years, but actually months, because we see that a lot of parties on the market didn't bring additional value to the partners, so to stay alive. So they were still running out of some funds, but the market is getting consolidated, which is also bad for the proposition of the parties that are working there. And also from the perspective of bookmakers, what we are seeing that there is constantly more and more demand for the esports because they started to understand that it's not just a niche product anymore, but with many of the bookmakers, this can be top 4, top 5 sports, many times making 5 to 10% of the handle.
Let's just talk a little bit about your founder journey here. And as I alluded to, Odin, very much a growth stage company. You're well on your way. Talk a bit about the shift from, when you think you were out of the startup phase and into the scale up phase. And, how did you navigate that, right? As a startup, everybody's in there side by side. You're fighting to stay alive. You're fighting for relevancy. You're trying to find product market fit at some point. Hopefully you find it. And then things change. What were some of the challenges for you shifting from that startup phase into the scale up phase?
I believe even before we moved there, essentially there were also multiple challenges to stay alive because many of the people are looking at like COVID times. Like when we speak about our journey, many of them are looking at it. Okay, so COVID days, this is where you cracked it, right? This is where essentially it all started to grow. And we're like, nah, because many of the bookmakers are looking at it the way that, okay, we have nothing else, so we should do esports. But at the same time, there were some of the esports solution already available from generic providers. And at the same time, many of the bookmakers were kind of really trying to figure out what's going on with the world. So they were not going to integrate anything new, not much was moving. So even though we started to have a lot of interest, we didn't get that much of the integrations. And, if you don't have the integration, you don't have the revenue. As a startup, you need the revenue, not just some signed documents. So what changed mostly was that the year after COVID started to kind of go away, that many of the bookmakers, they seem like, okay, this thing that is called esports essentially worked for us. We had a reasonable handle, the product was not good, and the margin was very, very bad. So what we can do about it? Because if there is a handle and if you have the right product, you can actually start making money instead of losing money. And this is where the thing started to shift a bit, where we signed our first clients, went into the integrations, such as Tipsport, such as the Betway back in the day, Sportsbet.io. And also, if you have some referrals where market starts to notice, and of course, Betway, they're one of the leaders when it comes to esports betting. Sportsbet.io quite well known in crypto space. So more and more of their competitors started to come along saying, okay, we've seen this, that, is this yours? So we would like to integrate you. But at the same time, there were also a couple of journeys where I can recall the situation where I was on the prospect calls and they were asking me, okay, so how many developers do you have? And this was just to check, like, is this a company that will be around in the upcoming 2 years? So I spend the time on the integration, and in 2 years' time, they are not even around, right? So am I going to even do that? And I was, let's say, inflating the figures, because back in the day, our team of developers was probably 5 to 10, which this kind of bookmakers, they will have like hundreds of developers. And literally our iframe, I can recall that 3 of our developers sat down for like 3 months around the Christmas and coded the entire iframe, which is also one of the notions where one of the founders developer came to me saying, Mike, what is that LinkedIn message? And I like, what do you mean? and we have a LinkedIn message like iframe in development 70% ready. There was not a line of code coded for iframe. And he was like standing behind me like, what the hell is that? But we again had to adapt, had to essentially start going in the way that market wanted us to be. So there were a couple of things like that. And then when it comes to scaling phase, we are right now, Odin is more than 200 people. The entire group is more than 300 people. So it's definitely about putting the middle management in place, having the proper planning, having a much more structure, because we've been growing significantly, and because we are maturing, we need to much more processes and much more of these things in place to do not lose that momentum on the market. But at the same time, it is a bit tougher to communicate the strategy and vision to 300 people than to 10 people, right? So this is what has been changing.
And on the fundraising side, I mean, no startup story is complete without talking about the fundraising. And I know you mentioned at the start here, Marek, you had some angel investors at the beginning. Since that time, there's public announcements that there's been a few rounds of successive funding since then. And I believe most recently this past June that there was a new round of funding announced and undisclosed amount. But my question to you is, for yourself, as you're looking at capitalizing the next stage of growth for Odin, I would assume there's probably internal discussions around, do we try and do this organically and fund growth with revenue versus do we take some capital and try and put the foot on the gas pedal? Give us some insight or a look behind the curtain on kind of some of the pros and cons as you weigh them up and ultimately how you arrive at a decision to raise growth capital.
Yeah, so if we look essentially at the last raise, this was just the secondaries. So no more capital for the company. This was more like exit for the early investors, some exit for the founders, like very partial exit. So in that regard, it was more about cleaning the cap table. We are in a position where, fortunately, one of the very few probably esports companies, we are reasonably profitable, which allows us to create that cushion to also look into the different verticals that we want to build. Also, essentially, not necessarily to raise. Even though we are right now looking at a couple of M&A opportunities on the market, some of them we are able to finance ourselves. Some of them we are right now looking at the potential sources of funding, whether that can be equity raise, whether it can be a debt financing, which is also available. So you are absolutely right. Even right now, like we are considering a couple of acquisitions where we are looking, this is something we can build ourselves in the upcoming 2 to 3 years, or we can buy with the product, with the distribution, with other things on plate and grow faster. Yes, there will be a higher price tag for that because we are buying a company versus building it. But at the same time, if the pros and cons are there, and if we are seeing the pros are outweighing the cons, then definitely this is something that we are looking into.
And over the next, say, 12 months, what are you most focused on? You alluded to potentially a couple acquisitions, so a bit of a focus in the M&A arena. But beyond that, what are some of the major maybe milestones or things you're looking to achieve for the business over 2026?
From our perspective, Odin is a maturing company that essentially has its trajectory when it comes to the market. The consolidation is happening. So we would like to some extent, I would say diversify, even though probably that is not the main goal. But at the same time, we are looking at adjacent verticals that we have the technology for, or we have the distribution for, where we can invest. So if you look at Odin in the upcoming 12 to 24 months, Odin will not be as you perceive it right now. Odin will be part of the larger group that we are essentially building, where some of our technical backgrounds when it comes to AI, when it comes to iframe technologies, when it comes to content management and other things will be essentially part of the Odin still, but some of those verticals will be split because they can grow on their own in the other sections of the markets. So we are creating the larger group that will essentially enable us to monetize on betting more to some extent, and also on the esports side a bit more. Because with all the partners that we work with, there are many things that we can bring them already. I believe Odin is quite well respected on the market when it comes to quality of the service, innovation, communication, the ways how we essentially work with the partners. So the other verticals that we bring to the market, we believe that we can really already guarantee the quality and the market will perceive that. At the same time, we can create much more value for our partners in that regard.
Well, sounds like there's no shortage of ambition and sounds like there's a lot of exciting initiatives in the pipeline. So look forward to hearing more about those over time. We're nearing the end, Marek. I always finish my episodes with a few rapid fire questions with my guests. So I'm going to deliver those to you right now. The very first one is this. When you wake up in the morning, open up your mobile, what's the first app you open up?
WhatsApp or Slack?
If after we were done recording this, you were going to go out to the finest karaoke bar in Prague, what song would you be singing at the karaoke bar?
Whew. Yeah, because I'm in a good mood right now. Probably we are the champions.
Love it. And then last one for you. If you could be somebody else for one day only, dead or alive, who would that be?
That's a tough one. Oh, hell with that. Abraham Lincoln? Not on the last day, though.
We'll accept that answer, Marek. Look, appreciate you swinging by today. For the audience that wants to get in touch with you, maybe learn a bit more about Odin, or for anything else that's piqued their interest in this discussion, can you quickly plug the best way for people to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. From either you can go and head to Odin GG with double D, double G as a webpage, or I'm also available on the LinkedIn, so you can find me there. And of course, happy to work with the partners either when it comes to esports, when it comes to betting, or essentially the wider ecosystem.
Excellent. Well, look, I'm glad we got to have this conversation today to make up for the one we didn't get to have in Las Vegas. Really wishing you and the team all the best for a strong rest of this year and a very successful 2026. Look forward to continuing to follow the Odin story.
Many thanks, Jesse, for having me. It was a pleasure.
The Betting Startups podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 4 out of the top 5 US operators personalize player experiences with Optimove. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/bettingstartups. And if you like what you see, you'll get your first month free.